Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Walking with Beasts, or Walking with Prehistoric Beasts, depending on your fancy, from 2001. And this is the winner of my Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie or show, I guess in this case, then click on the link below for my Patreon and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Now, Walking with Beasts is the sequel to Walking with Dinosaurs, which takes place between the end of the dinosaurs and the beginning of man, and it's a less popular period. Dinosaurs are very popular, you always see stuff with dinosaurs, but this period between the woolly mammoths and the Sabertooths and everything like that, certainly there are things in pop culture of that, but it's not really something I am as familiar with. And conceptually, I think it is kind of an interesting place to take the series. You could certainly go in more in depth on the various periods that they spend only an hour on, but it's also interesting to kind of shine light on a period of history that doesn't really get the light shined on it as much. And I think that's actually one of the coolest things, and one of the things I was really interested in with Walking with Beasts. There's also, periods before the dinosaurs, which I hope they do at some point too, and all sorts of things like that I think they could really get into. But this is scientifically an interesting idea. It's interesting for an audience perspective, because it's like, well, where are you going to go with Walking with Dinosaurs? Is that it? And instead of going like, oh, we'll just do a similar kind of cash-in thing, this seemed to be more of a conceptual way to do it, which I thought was actually really cool. However, there are various problems with this. I don't necessarily think this is good as Walking with Dinosaurs. First off, it's about half as long as Walking with Dinosaurs. Every episode is a half hour rather than in Walking with Dinosaurs where they're an hour long. And I'm not exactly sure why they decided to cut the episodes down. That seems to be kind of an odd choice, since the last series did really well. And you'd think that they'd want to continue doing the hour-long things, and that kind of like messes with the storytelling quite a bit. Now, I'm not kind of someone who's like harping on like they had to do the hour, and if they didn't do the hour, I'm not gonna like it. It's just in the hour-long Walking with Dinosaurs, they would have various different subplots. They could get into the era as well as have a plot line with different like creature from that time. And in Walking with Prehistoric Beasts, they just literally do not have as much time to do anything with that. I think some episodes do it better than others. Certainly not every episode of Walking with Dinosaurs was perfect, but I think in Walking with Prehistoric Beasts or Walking with Beasts, they have often the problem of like trying to take on way too much. And if you think like sometimes these are taking on different eras, you have however many millions of years between each episode, and you're trying to kind of sum up this particular era in first an hour seems kind of ambitious and a little foolish, but a half hour, magnifies that to a certain degree. And when I found out it was a half hour first, I was like, did I get the wrong copy of this? Like, is this the cut down version? But it is in fact a half hour. I think they do a pretty good job with the time constraint, but it is a little odd, because like, did the BBC insist on this? Did they think it would play better? I don't really understand the rationale of why changing the episode length. I couldn't find out why, but it just seemed a little odd to me. It did sort of hurt the storytelling, and I think something Walking with Dinosaurs is you could get more into the nuances of certain things and really play within these kind of eras and get really into them. And this one, like, it almost felt like you're really going through them rather quickly. But I still found it fascinating. I don't really know much about this period. I didn't know like, oh, that's what Paraguay looks like. That's what the Savannah Desert was, an ocean at one point, things like that. Learning about how birds were actually the big predators after the dinosaurs and actually used to hunt horses. They have a line in, I think it's the first episode, this is a world where birds hunt horses, and it's like heightens like the kind of craziness based on like how things evolved from this. And it is actually really, really interesting if you think about that, like thinking of how things evolved and changed over time, and how these things became something, and how the gastronons, I think, or the terror birds, I think they're called, those are like really kind of interesting and crazy looking, but those were like the major predators at the time. And seeing the evolution of kind of like apes to man, seeing whales used to be these creatures in forests who then evolved into swimming in oceans, seeing where horses come from. Much like Walking with Dinosaurs, the kind of marquee character, I guess, is sort of the mammoth. You could have a debate over who's the bigger character, Sabertooth or the woolly mammoth, but I think woolly mammoths are still pretty big. And they aren't in it until the last episode, which timeline-wise is correct, but it's sort of interesting that the same with, Tyrannosaurus Rex being in the end of Walking with Dinosaurs. I'm not sure if that's a similar thing or just how it sort of worked out. Although I won't go through episode by episode, certainly some of the standouts is just admiring these creatures dinosaurs and learning the information, which the show definitely takes advantage of its concept, and that the fact that you are learning all this stuff and you were kind of fascinated by it. I think if you were more familiar with this time period, you probably have a very different review than what I'm going to give, but since I was new to all this information, I was probably giving it more breaks than maybe it deserved. If you were someone who studied that period, you might go like, oh, this is awful, like they don't know what they're talking about. But to me, I was like, oh, that's a thing? Cool. But I think certain things work better than others. This has a higher emphasis on CGI, which kind of would happen in the 2000s with television, which always surprised me at the time. I was like, but I thought that like took a really long time to do when they made it in like Pixar movies. Why would you want to like skimp on that and make it look all shitty? But they seem to want to do that. I don't know. And not have as much emphasis on using models and so forth. In certain episodes, I think the framing and the way they use models, particularly the last one, still holds up as well. But in other ones, particularly, I think it's the 4th episode, Next of Kin, which is about apes who, you know, the first apes who stand on their hind legs and so forth. That was like, those were really bad. Like, I think the CG was probably at its worst in that episode. They should have used more models or people in suits or something. Like, it just felt like that was sort of a week out to do. Because like, why do that so much? And particularly since the last one they had just made. And I think like much like Jurassic Park, it's funny because Jurassic Park is always like, well, that's why we use CG. But I'm like, yes, but Jurassic Park is Jurassic Park because they understood when to use CG, not to only use CG. And the first Walking with Dinosaurs learned that as well. But it's like kind of like the difference between when you see the first Jurassic Park and then you see, you know, what the influence of Jurassic Park became is sort of like the difference between Walking with Dinosaurs and Walking with Beasts. But for the most part, they really tried to stay CG a lot, which I don't know if maybe that cost less or something, but I didn't really like that they did that. I liked particularly the episode about the saber-toothed tigers. I thought, you know, this show and this miniseries in particular likes to be very brutal about like mothers and children and the children getting killed and the children, you know, there's one with a baby who had been raised with the mother, and then the mother has to get rid of the baby to raise another child because she can't like mother both at the same time, so this child has to go off on its own. That's rather heartbreaking. But these others where giant ants end up eating like this baby bird, which is pretty horrific, pretty brutal stuff. The saber-toothed tiger episode has one where they kill a bunch of baby saber-toothed tigers and then basically mate with their mothers to kind of eliminate the previous kind of patriarch of that clan, which is like pretty horrific and horrible. I was like, whoa, you guys really went there. And it felt like Walking with Dinosaurs didn't get as depressing as this one did. It seemed to want to do that rather quickly. I don't know why it happened so often. Often it felt like almost like a trope. Like it's like, oh, okay, I'm watching Walking with Beasts and they have to show me that the world is harsh and cruel at the same time while explaining prehistoric beasts to me. I think, you know, I can't imagine watching this with a kid or something. It's like kind of like wanted to be like, no, you have to watch this with your 12-year-old before they understand, you know, that life is cruel and their heart will be ripped out in front of them. Which Walking with Beasts seemed to really like to do. I don't know why. The last two I've heard more positive things about, the saber-toothed tiger one and the one with the mammoths and like early man, and I think that one was good. The framing in the last one I thought was actually the best, but the beauty that I saw in the Walking with Dinosaurs episode, particularly about one of the flying dinosaurs whose names I forget now, and seeing him kind of on his last flight was something that I don't think this series ever even got close to touching. And it's because like that one would let that plot line go on and other plot lines go on, and this one had to stay more in the A plot and explaining the period thing. It couldn't really do the thing where like, let's explain the period and have a B plot as well and all this stuff. And I think that lets you play and get more into it, and in that way I don't feel like I loved this series as much as Walking with Dinosaurs. And I can understand if you're really into them and you're going through them and you'll watch this and you'll sort of be fine with it. It's a good show. It's not a bad show. It is sort of interesting that it's called Walking with Prehistoric Beasts in America, and in England it's called Walking with Beasts. I watched the Kenneth Branagh version. The England one is Stockard Channing. I just like the English one, but usually with the England to America translation sort of thing, or when you carry things over, the English title is usually, you know, more pronounced and like a little more pretentious and longer, and the American one is like slam bang, and it's like sort of the reverse in this case. I'm not sure why, like, because you think like Prehistoric Beasts, you'd want to have that like, you know, extra description in there for the English audiences, but apparently that is not true, unless I'm like totally off, but that's what I've read basically. I would think like if you really like Walking with Dinosaurs, this is a cool way to place to go and you get the information from it. But I think Walking with Dinosaurs wasn't just like, hey, there's CG dinosaurs in a show and we made it like we're making a nature documentary. Like, that was a fascinating idea. Like, we're going to shoot dinosaurs like we're actually filming them. And this doesn't really get into that much at all. It kind of just like goes so into the concept, it doesn't play that way, and you're not even thinking about it till later on. They use like night vision, or one of the creatures like knocks the camera over and stuff like that. But it doesn't play as much into that, and you don't think about it. And it doesn't play as much like a nature documentary because they're going through it so quickly. They're almost more caring about like the concept and the information, which kind of overloads this show because they don't have enough time to breathe. I would love to see Walking with Prehistoric Beasts that was given the amount of time that Walking with Dinosaurs did, because it's literally like same, I think 6 episodes, about the same as the last one, and half the length. And I think that's really unfortunate, because I wish they had gotten to really have fun with this period, because it seems like a really interesting period of history that they should be able to go into as much as they did with learning about the dinosaurs. If you have a kid who's into dinosaurs and you want them to know this information and also know that the world is cruel and unforgiving, I guess, and this isn't a bad show. It just, in comparison to being the sequel to the great Walking with Dinosaurs, I think this shows kind of the weakness in their franchise, and they thought conceptually, where should we take it? And I agree, like, this is like a lot of respect that they were able to go like, hey, this period isn't as marketable, but we still want to do this. It didn't feel as much like a nature documentary. It felt more like they were purposely making like a Hollywood production kind of sequel, and they didn't really conceptually think of how it was made and what they could really do with that format. They were more thinking about kind of just like presenting a quick cash grab sequel, and I think it's maybe a little better than describing it that way, but I don't think it really gets to the heights of Walking with Dinosaurs either. Like, it's a decently good follow-up, but that's sort of all it is. And I wish it could have been more. I wish it could have done more with its format, and I wish it could have been, I guess, gone to those heights. But it's not bad for what it is, and I'm glad for the information I got from it. And you won't be necessarily disappointed. But if someone was asking you what's the better one, there wouldn't be a question about it. And I think that's more of the fault of Walking with Prehistoric Beasts, and the question of like, why would you cut it in half? Why wouldn't you give this time period the necessary time to go into it? And those are questions that kind of like this show doesn't really answer, and those questions like hang over the show because you know they can do it in a better way, but for some reason they just didn't, probably to get this out faster. But it seems like the glory of Walking with Dinosaurs, the care they put into making it, and it didn't feel like they had enough time to really put as much of that into Walking with Beasts. That's why they cut down the length and were able to put that care into the half-hour ones, but I much prefer really going into those hour-long things. I think that's something that really hindered Walking with Beasts, but it is still an enjoyable miniseries. And if you love Walking with Dinosaurs and you love experiencing that miniseries, I think this is a good logical next step to go, and you just sort of accept it and have a good, decent enough time with that. So if you have seen Walking with Beasts and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.